שמו, מסרו מיום ליום ישועתו. שירו לאדוני, שיר חדש, שירו לאדוני, כל הארץ, שירו לאדוני, ברכו שמו, בסרו מיום ליום ישועתו. שירו לאדוני שיר חדש, שירו לאדוני כל הארץ, שירו לאדוני ברכו שמו, בסרו מיום ליום ישועתו. ספרו בגויים כבודו, לכל העמים נפלאותיו, כי גדול אדוני ומהולל מאוד, נורא הוא על כל אלוהים. שירו לאדוני שיר חדש, שירו לאדוני כל הארץ, שירו לאדוני ברכו שמו, בסרו מיום ליום ישועתו. ספרו בגויים כבודו, לכל העמים נפלאותיו, כי גדול אדוני ומהולל מאוד, נורא הוא על כל אלוהים. שירו לאדוני שיר חדש, שירו לאדוני כל הארץ, שירו לאדוני ברכו שמו, בסרו מיום ליום ישועתו. ספרו בגויים כבודו, לכל העמים נפלאותיו, כי גדול אדוני ומהולל מאוד, נורא הוא על כל אלוהים. שיר לאדוני, שיר לאדוני, שיר לאדוני. ספרו בגויים כבודו, לכל העמים נפלאותיו, כי גדול אדוני ומהולל מאוד, נורא הוא על כל אלוהים. שירו לאדוני שיר חדש, שירו לאדוני כל הארץ, שירו לאדוני ברכו שמו, מסרו מיום ליום ישועתו.
טוב ומנעים, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה 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 טוב
Shabbat Shalom. Now my microphone is on. That's 2 days in a row. All right. We begin setting our intention for this Shabbat morning on page 67. May the door of the synagogue be wide enough to receive all who hunger for love, all who are lonely for friendship. May it welcome all who have cares to unburden, thanks to express, hopes to nurture. May the door of the synagogue be narrow enough to shut out pettiness and pride, envy and enmity. May its threshold be no stumbling block to young or straying feet. May it be too high to admit complacency, selfishness, and harshness. May this synagogue be, for all who enter, the doorway to a richer and more meaningful life. Page 76. We join together in the words of Asher Yatzar as we thank God for our bodies. Praise to you, Adonai our God, sovereign of the universe, who formed the human body with skill, creating the body's many pathways and openings. It is well known before your throne of glory that if one of them be wrongly opened or closed, it would be impossible to endure and stand before you. Blessed are you, Adonai, who heals all flesh, working wondrously. Baruch atah Adonai, rofeh chol basar umafli la'asot. Page 78, Elohai neshama shenatata bi. My God, the soul you have given me is pure.
So this song is one of my own meditative chants to help focus on breath, and through the breath, hopefully touch the soul. So in our tradition, breath and soul are one. So Elohai neshama, my breath, my God, this breath you've given me is pure. Elohai neshama, my God, the soul you've given me is pure. So if you can pick up the melody, please join in, or join in simply by breathing with the phrases, taking nice, deep breaths that fill and loosen the belly. Elohai neshama shenatata bi tehorai Elohai neshama shenatata bi tehorai Elohai neshama shenatata bi tehorai Elohai neshama shenatata bi tehorai.
Page 83, we read responsively. As I awaken, let this be my thought. May my day be filled with acts of loving kindness. Let me be drawn to learning and discernment, and may my actions be shaped by mitzvot. Keep me from iniquity, disgrace, and sin. May I not be overwhelmed by temptation or despair. Distance me from evil people and false friends. Let me cultivate a life of goodness. May my hands reach out in kindness, and I will serve God through acts of righteousness. Today and every day may I merit your mercy by living my life with compassion and love. Holy One of blessing, draw me to your words. Teach me the art of sacred living. Baruch atah Adonai, hamelamed chasadim tovim le'amo Yisrael. We join together on page 106 as we rise for Chatzi Kaddish and remain standing through Shema.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה. ועלמד יברך ירותי וימליך מלכותי, בחייכון וביומכון, ובחיי דרכו בית ישראל. בגלה, בגלה, ובזמן קריב, ואמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מברך, לעולם לעלמי המיה. יתברך, יתברך וישתבח, ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל, שמי דקודשה בריחו לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, דמירם בעלמא, ואמרו אמן. ברכו את אדוני המבורך. המבורך לעולם ועד.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, yotzer or uvarei choshech, oseh shalom uvarei et hakol, hameir la'aretz v'ladarim aleha barachamim, uvtuvo mechadesh b'chol yom tamid ma'aseh v'reishit. Ma rabu ma'asecha Adonai, kulam b'chochma asita, mal'ach ha'aretz kinyanecha. Titbarach Adonai Eloheinu, al shevach ma'aseh yadecha, Ba'al ma'orei or sha'asita yifa'arucha sela, or chadash al tzion ta'ir, v'nizkeh hulanu meheira la'oro, Baruch atah Adonai, yotzer ha'me'orot. At the bottom of page 113, we join together. Love your neighbor as yourself, you said, and light-blinded we saw, that inner and outer worlds are one, as you are one. You spoke and we wrote, we reached for you down the centuries, your light moving before us, as we climbed, fell back, and climbed again, your Sinai of life. Baruch atah Adonai, habocher ba'amo Yisrael be'ahava.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kevon Malchuto Leolam Va'ed.
You may be seated. We continue with the Ve'ahavta on page 116.
ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ושוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם להות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים, אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
Page 121 at the bottom, we read responsively. The eternal truth is that you alone are God, and there is none else. May the righteous of all nations rejoice in your love and exult in your justice. Let them beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Let nation not lift up sword against nation, nor learn war anymore. You shall not hate your brother or your sister in your heart. The stranger that sojourns with you shall be accepted as your equal, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. Why do you crush my people and oppress the poor, asks God. We know that the Eternal One defends the poor and upholds the rights of the needy. Praise to God Most High. Blessed is God and deserving of blessing.
חדשה, שיבחו גאולים, לשמך על שפת הים, יחד כולם הודו, והמליכו ואמרו, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. Israel, קומה בעזרת ישראל, ופדחנו ממך יהודה וישראל, גואלנו, אדוני צבאות שמו, קדוש ישראל, ברוך אתה אדוני, גאל Israel.
We continue with the Amidah on page 124. Please rise.
Adonai, open up my lips, at my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu ve'Elohei Avoteinu v'Imoteinu Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzhak ve'Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel ve'Elohei Leah Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor ve'Hanora El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim ve'Konei Hakol וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות, ומביא גאולה לפני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה, מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה, אדוני, מגן אברהם ועזרת שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיה הכל אתה רב להושיע, מוריד הטל. מחכל חיים בחסד, מחיה הכל ברחמים רבים. סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות, ומי דומה לך? מלך ממית ומחיה, ומצמיח ישועה, ונאמן אתה לחיות הכל. ברוך אתה אדוני מחיי הכל. נקדש את שמך בעולם, כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמי מרום, ככתוב על יד נביאך, וקרא זה ואמר, קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות, מלוך כל הארץ כבודו. אדיר אדירנו אדוני אדוננו, מאדיר שמך בכל הארץ, ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו. היכנו אלוהינו, הוא אבינו ומלכנו, הוא מושיענו והוא ישמיענו, ורחמיו לעיני כל חי. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, ימלוך אדוני לעולם, אלוהיך ציון לדור ודור. הללויה. לדור ודור נגיד גודלך, ולנצח נצחים קדושתך נגיש. ושבחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש.
You may be seated. We continue on page 132 as we join together singing Yismechu, rejoicing in Shabbat.
Yismechu b'malechutecha, shomrei, shomrei, shomrei Shabbat, v'korei oneg Shabbat. Yismechu b'malechutecha, shomrei, shomrei, shomrei Shabbat, v'korei oneg Shabbat. מקדשי שביעי שבת, כולם ישבעו ויתענגו מטובך השבת. ישמחו במלכותך, שומרי 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 שבת, וקוראי עונג שבת. ישמחו במלכותך, שומרי 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 שבת, וקוראי עונג שבת. השביעי רצית בו וקידשתו שבת, חמדת ימים אותו קראת שבת. ישמחו במלכותך, שומרי 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 שבת, וקוראי עונג שבת. ישמחו במלכותך, שומרי 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 שבת, וקוראי עונג שבת. זכר למעשה
Shabbat, Zecher Lemase Bereshit Shabbat, Yismechu V'malechutecha, Shomrei Shabbat, V'korei Onei Shabbat, Yismechu V'malechutecha, Shomrei Shabbat, V'korei Onei Shabbat.
Together on page 134. Our God and God of our ancestors, be pleased with our rest. Sanctify us with your mitzvot, and grant us a share in your Torah. Satisfy us with your goodness, and gladden us with your salvation. Purify our hearts to serve you in truth. In your gracious love, Adonai our God, grant us your holy Shabbat as a heritage. May Israel, who sanctifies your name, rest on Shabbat. Blessed are you, Adonai, who sanctifies Shabbat. Baruch atah Adonai, Mekadesh HaShabbat. Ever-present one, may we, your people Israel, be worthy in our deeds and our prayer. Wherever we live, wherever we seek you, in this land, in Zion restored, in all lands, you are our God, whom alone we serve in reverence. Baruch atah Adonai, she'otecha levadcha be'ira na'avod. On page 139, we thank God for all those things around us. For the expanding grandeur of creation, worlds known and unknown, galaxies beyond galaxies, filling us with awe and challenging our imaginations. Modim anachnu lach. For this fragile planet Earth, its times and tides, its sunsets and seasons. Modim anachnu lach. For the joy of human life, its wonders and surprises, its hopes and achievements. Modim anachnu lach. For human community, our common past and future hope, our oneness transcending all separation, our capacity to work for peace and justice in the midst of hostility and oppression. Modim anachnu lach. For high hopes and noble causes, for faith without fanaticism, for understanding of views not shared. Modim anachnu lach. For all who have labored and suffered for a fairer world, who have lived so that others might live in dignity and freedom. Modim anachnu lach. For human liberties and sacred rights, for opportunities to change and grow, to affirm and choose. Modim anachnu lach. We pray that we may live not by our fears, but by our hopes, not by our words, but by our deeds. Blessed are you, Adonai, your name is goodness, and you are worthy of thanksgiving. Baruch atah Adonai, hatov shimcha ulecha na'eh lehodot.
Shalom tova uvracha. Chen v'chesed v'rachamim. Chen v'chesed v'rachamim. Rachamim. Sim shalom tova uvracha. Sim shalom tova uvracha. Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Aleinu ve'al kol Israel, Amecha, Sim Shalom, Tova, Uvracha, Sim Shalom, Tova, Uvracha.
We take a few moments now for our own silent prayers. We will join together back on page 62 with the words of Elohai Nitzor.
Elohai Netzor Shoni Meira Usfatai Midaber Mirma Velim Kalelai Nafshi Tido Venafshi Tehafar Kodie Petach Libi Betoratecha Ubemitzvotecha Tirdof Nafshi Vechol HaChoshvim Alai Ra'a Meirafer Atzatam V'Kalkel Machashavtam Haselman Shemecha Haselman Yiminecha Haselman Kedushatecha Haselman Toratecha Leman Yehatzu Yelidecha Hoshia Yemincha Va'aneni Iyul deratzon imrefi Vehigion libi lefanecha Adonai tzuri vegoali Adonai tzuri vegoali Ose shalom imroma Hu yase shalom Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol yoshvei tevel ve'al
Seder Kriyat HaTorah, our service for the reading of Torah, page 245. Assemble the people, men, women, and children, and the strangers in your cities, to hear, to learn, to revere Adonai your God, to observe faithfully the words of this Torah, and let their children who do not yet know it hear, that they too may learn to revere Adonai your God. We rise in honor of our Torah.
Ein kemocha v'Elohim Adonai, ve'ein kemasecha, malchutecha malchut, kol olamim u'memshaltecha bechol dor v'dor. Adonai melech, Adonai malach, Adonai imloch, Leolam vahed, Adonai oz le'amo itein, Adonai yevarech et amo v'shalom.
On the bottom of page 247, we read responsively. In this scroll is the secret of our people's life from Sinai until now. Its teaching is love and justice, goodness and hope. Freedom is its gift to all who treasure it.
Baruch Shenatan Torah Torah, Baruch Shenatan Torah Torah le'amo Israel b'kedushato. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad, Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh Shemo. Gadlul Adonai iti, uneromema Shemo yachdav. Lecha Adonai hagedula v'hagevura v'hatiferet v'hanetzach v'hahod ki chol b'shamayim u'va'aretz ki chol b'shamayim u'va'aretz Lecha Adonai hamamlacha Ve'amid na'aseh lechol lerosh. Torah, 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 tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 tziva lanu Moshe.
Okay. Instead of you can be seated if you'd like to stay at your seat, but if you'd like to come up and join together in a text study, I would love to have you join me up on the bima. If you would like to stay at your seats, you can. Okay. For real, you're all allowed to come up if you want, but if you don't want to, you can be seated. You don't have to stand. You want just one? Yeah. what happened to the microphone. I found it. Okay. All right. So we have a couple of things. This is a double Torah portion. Chicky, you can be seated. You don't have to stand. This is a double Torah portion of Matot Maseh, trying to make sure everything fits in within our calendar cycle. So there's a bunch of things happening, shocker, right? So we have the beginning that Moses is explaining to Israelites all the laws concerning with the vows made by both men and women. Israel wages war against the Midianites. The laws about wars and what you can take are outlined. Then we learn about the tribes of Reuben and Gad, who are granted permission to stay on the east bank of the Jordan River instead of joining on the west side. And then you get the itinerary of the Israelites through the wilderness from Egypt to Jordan. Each stop is laid out. Moses tells Israel to remove the current inhabitants of the land that God will give them and to destroy their gods. The boundaries of the land of Israel are defined, and then we also learn about the Levitical cities and the cities of refuge. Then God makes a precise distinction between murder and manslaughter. And then the laws of inheritance as they apply to Israelite women are delineated. So just, jumping here and there, and some wars, some lands, some laws, some vows, the usual in Torah, right? So what I wanted to focus on was the spaces between our text. And what does that mean, and what can we learn from these spaces? And we'll see when we open up Torah and I read these verses for you that there are spaces between some of these verses. I tried to show it for you there in the Hebrew. So you can see that there's like an opening space both in the English and in the Hebrew itself. So I am going to ask, and this is not a full section because it was way too many verses. So we're looking at Numbers 32, verse 6 and 7, and then 13 to 19. Bernadette. I know.
Moses replied to the Gadites and the Reubenites, "Are your brothers to go to war while you stay here? Why will you turn the minds of the Israelites from crossing into the land that the Lord has given them? The Lord was incensed to Israel, and for 40 years he made them wander in the wilderness until the whole generation that had provoked the Lord's displeasure was gone. And now you, a breed of sinful men, have replaced your fathers to add still further to the Lord's wrath against Israel. If you turn away from him and he abandons them once more in the wilderness, you will bring calamity upon all this people." Then they stepped up to him and said, "We will build here sheepfolds for our flocks and towns for our children, and we will hasten as shock troops in the van of the Israelites until we have established them in their home, while our children stay in the fortified towns because of the inhabitants of the land. We will not return to our homes until every one of the Israelites is in possession of his portion, but we will not have a share with them in the territory beyond the Jordan, for we have received our share on the east side of the Jordan."
Thank you. So we are talking about the Reubenites and the Gadites, right? They ask for this to be able to be on the east side. Moses is not so thrilled, thinks that they're kind of ducking out on their responsibility, gets a little upset. God gets a little upset, right? And then they step up. There is this space, and then they step up, right? So there's also a space, a few verses earlier, between verses 4 and 5, when it seems like the Reubenites and Gadites kind of take this big breath and then ask for their favor of being able to stay on the east side. So I don't have that piece in here, but there's that other break in the text. Okay? So when we look at that large space in the text, why do you think it's here? Before we get to commentary, I'm actually asking a question that I would love an answer to. Any guesses? Why do you think this space is here? Yeah?
The second part is an explanation of what they're going to do. They've already said what they don't want to do, but they are saying this is what we'll do. We'll be in the front, the van, which is this shape formation. Right. So they'll be at the tip of the spear. So they'll be the first troops going in. So they're saying, it's not that we're not going to do anything, we're going to do something.
Awesome.
Also, I know if you're going, before you decide to be the tip of the spear, you're going to stop, take a breath, and think about that. So this feels like a breathing space.
Awesome, right? Go ahead, Ab.
Also commenting on what she said over there, as far as reading the text and picturing the words being spoken, there's that moment of pause from one thought to another.
Yeah, absolutely, right? So it could be that their space means nothing. I just want to point that out. It could mean that it means nothing. But we have this idea of maybe it is that breath. Maybe it is that transitioning from one thought to another, but it is that taking that step forward. So Rabbi Vered Harris talks about this idea. Cesar, would you read that one?
Sure. It seems that the Gadites and Reubenites heard Moses' concerns about their request and tempered their petition accordingly. It is easy to become defensive, dig in our heels, and respond to anger with anger. The gap gives the Gadites and Reubenites a moment to listen and humbly integrate Moses' objections into their plan to reach their new goal.
Thank you. Right, so I love this interpretation. Not only is it this breath, but they could have come back at and been like, calm down, I'm going to do this. But instead they said, look, we're going to help out, we're going to do this, and taking that time to make sure that they can listen and really hear what's being said and be able to respond accordingly. So we see that there's this way of understanding a gap as a spiritual connection, right? A way of bringing God into it. And so there is a text that you have on your sheets, 1 Kings 19:12-13, that gives an understanding of how God can fit into a space. All right, so I'm going to have you read that, Samantha.
All right. After the earthquake and fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. After the fire, a soft murmuring sound. Then Elijah heard it. He wrapped his mantle about his face and went out and stood in the entrance of the cave. And then a voice addressed him. Why are you here, Elijah?
Thank you, right? So we hear this, the Hebrew is kol dmama v'daka, or daka, right? And we hear this a lot within our high holiday liturgy, that this quiet murmuring voice, right? God doesn't always have to have a booming voice, but that sometimes you can find God within those silences. So Rabbi Rebecca Einstein-Shore talks about this idea that's found in Kings and how it connects here as well. So, Michael. This Michael, sorry, that was confusing. Okay.
The prophet Elijah reminds us that God is found not in the loud sounds, but in the still, soft voice. In other words, God is in that quiet, sacred space, the place where we make those difficult decisions between what we want for ourselves and what we need others and what others need of us. In verse 13, God asks Elijah, Ma lechafo, why are you here? Surely God knows what brought his prophet to him. The question, therefore, is meant to force Elijah to confront himself, to acknowledge and own his questions and his concerns and his fears.
Awesome, thank you, right? So now we're putting God in it, but we're also putting ourselves back in it and making sure that we are looking within ourselves. So what do we take from these spaces? And Rabbi Rebecca Einstein-Shore continues. So, yeah, I'm gonna have you read.
When we draw into ourselves, into that quiet, sacred space, God inquires of us as he did of Elijah. Why are you here? What dilemma is so troubling that you bring yourself, your most vulnerable self, into my comforting, supportive presence? Stay here with me until you are prepared to reroute yourself and know that I will never leave you.
Thank you. I love this. I think that this is just absolutely beautiful. This, why are you here? What are you doing? We don't take time a lot to look inward and pause and reflect and say, what is going on in my life? Where is God right now? And how do I fit within this? And so we think about this space, which may just be a coincidence and a paragraph separator separating one voice from another, but we're going to think about it from a much more introspective way, right? That God is in those spaces, and not just God, but the importance of us looking inside ourselves. So this Shabbat, oh, go ahead.
The spaces, since I am a student of psychology, and that's also linked with meditation, the area of space with the words here where God asks, why are you here, almost as if God's being Elijah's psychologist to see if Elijah's smart enough to figure out for himself.
There you go, absolutely, right? But again, that force of us needing to look inside ourselves. Sometimes we need somebody to remind us to do that, and so God is doing that. But making sure that we think about the spaces, God's quiet voice, and being able to look inward. So as we go this Shabbat, and every Shabbat, may we think about why we're here, why we're doing what we're doing, and make sure that those small spaces, those breaths, give us that opportunity to look inward. Shabbat Shalom. So we are going to read those verses. I'm going to read those verses. So we have our blessing here. And if you would like, you can come close to Torah to see it being read. All right. So many things. Okay. And we do our blessing together. Baruch hu et Adonai hambarach, Baruch Adonai hambarach le'olam va'ed, Baruch ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol hamim, v'natan lanu et Torato, Baruch ata Adonai noten haTorah. Amen. Taking a big deep breath, because we have that space. Vigshu elav ve'omru gidrat tson nivne lemiknenu po v'arim letapenu v'anachnu nachaletz chushim lifnei b'nei Yisrael ad asher im hevi'onum el mikomam v'yashav tapenu v'arei hamivtzar mipnei yoshvei haaretz lo nashuv el batenu ad hit nachel b'nei Yisrael Ish nachalato ki lo ninchel otam me'ever le'yarden v'hala ki va nachalatenu elenu me'ever hayarden mizracha. Baruch ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torat emet v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu Baruch ata Adonai noten haTorah. As we take these spaces and these words into our heart, we think of those who are in need of our blessings of healing, those who are in need of healing of body, of mind, and of soul. We think of them and whisper their names aloud now. We join together in the words of Misha Berach, which can be found on page 253.
May the source of strength bless the ones before us. Help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say Amen. Misheberach imotenu mekor abracha bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say Amen.
Amen. Page 252. If you are not yet standing, I invite you to rise in honor of our Torah.
Vezot haTorah asher sam Moshe lifnei bnei Yisrael hapi Adonai
page 256. We continue with Aleinu on page 283.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, ששם חלקנו ויחד את שמו, וגורלנו להמליך מלכותו, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד.
You may be seated. We turn now to page 289 for our memorial meditation. In nature's ebb and flow, God's eternal law abides. When tears dim our vision or grief clouds our understanding, we often lose sight of God's eternal plan. Yet we know that growth and decay, life and death, all reveal a divine purpose. God, who is our support in the struggles of life, is also our hope in death. We have set God before us and shall not despair. In God's hands are the souls of all the living and the spirits of all flesh. Under God's protection we abide, and by God's love are we comforted. O life of our life, soul of our soul, cause your light to shine into our hearts and fill our spirits with abiding trust in you. Our thoughts turn now to those in our community who have died at this time in years past. As we mark their yardzites, we remember them. Jared Abelow, Hilda Barnholtz, Jewel Bennett, Sylvia Berlin, Dorothy Sampson Horowitz-Borowitz, Benjamin Bruckstein, Erickson John Bryan, Hannah Cohn, Willard L. Cohodes, Jean Franco, Dickie Friedman, Morty Friedman, Louis Glickenhaus, Maury Goldstein, Ben Goshawk, Ray Gerwitz, Belle Hafkin, Lois Eisenstein-Horling, Marjorie Kallenberg, Susan Watch-DeKogan, Louise Cohan, Victor Lawson, Sylvia Maurer, Gussie Gans-McCune, Isara Longoria Mendez, Bessie Messer, Askar Majarni, Joe Mosser, Jeanette Edelman Newman, Eileen O'Keefe, Marion Block Oppenheimer, Lynn Penner, Samuel Penner, Sarah Ricklin, Benjamin Ringel, Leo Rose, Ben Ruttenberg, Vera A.E. Sines, Adolf Steinhardt, Isidore Stern, Edward Strawgate, Frank Tarantino, David von Abema, Karen Jane Wagner, Mortimer Weingart, Janet Wheeler, Al Ybarra, Stanley Zach, and Thelma J. Zide. To all of these names, we think of those who've died this past month, whose families are in a mourning period of Shloshim. We remember Roberta Bobby Feldstone, Marjorie Louise Block, and Howard Schechterman. We also think of one who's died this past week, whose family is in a mourning period of Shiva. We remember Helene Katz Ricklin, wife of Arthur Ricklin, mother of Rand and Martha Ricklin, Tara and Jeff Schiller, and Scott Ricklin, sister of Ronald and Helene Katz, grandmother of Callie and Dan Levin, Brady Schiller, Morgan Ricklin, and Marina Ricklin, step-grandmother of Sarah Beck, and great-grandmother of Zahara and Asher, cousin of Candy and Buddy Gardner. To all of these names, we add those which are in our hearts each and every day as we turn to page 294 for Kaddish Yatom and rise together as one community. Yit gadal v'yit kadash shemei rabbah, be'alma divrach chirutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayachon u'vyomechon u'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael, ba'agala u'izman karib imru, amen. Yehei shmei rabbah mevarach le'olam ulmei almaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalal shemei d'kudasha b'richu, la'ela min kol berchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechamata, da'amiran be'alma v'imru, amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru, amen. Osei shalom b'imromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru, amen. May the one who creates harmony on high bring peace to us and to all Israel, to which we say, amen. Our closing song this morning is Esai. The words can be found on page 339. This Shabbat, may we take the moments to think of those silences and those spaces and think, why am I here? Shabbat Shalom.